Hello, my name is Frankie and today we're going to be solving your dog's separation anxiety. Whether your dog's showing separation anxiety already or you have a new dog and you just want to set them up for long-term success by preventing separation anxiety from developing in the first place, we're going to talk about our top 5 tips today to help you manage and stop separation anxiety. And if you stick around to the end, we also have a bonus tip, which is something I think is so important, which is often overlooked whenever we look at the separation anxiety journey. Tip number 1. This should be an obvious one, but honestly it's something that we still have to unpack whenever I see clients for separation anxiety. You've come home, the dog's destroyed the sofa, they've eaten your favourite pair of slippers, and you're frustrated and you're mad, but don't yell at the dog. The moment's passed, the opportunity to fix the behaviour is gone, the dog's destroyed those things whenever you've been out at work and you've come home, and if you start yelling at the dog when you come home, they don't understand why they're being corrected, they don't understand what they're being yelled at for. You can't drag them over to the mess they've made and tell them off. A dog's brain doesn't work like that, they're very in the moment. As well as that, all you're doing is creating anxiety about you returning home. They fear you coming back because they know they're going to get yelled at. They've got an association of negativity for you coming to the door, which in turn can actually cause you returning home to make them more anxious and therefore more likely to develop separation anxiety and show these issues in the first place. So as frustrating as it may be, the moment's gone. You don't yell at your dog whenever you get home and you find something that they've destroyed. This feeds nicely into our second tip. We want to counter condition our coming and going. So as well as if you come home and the dog's destroyed the place, you don't make a big fuss over it. If your dog hasn't done anything bad, if your dog doesn't have separation anxiety, or whether they do or whether they don't, when you come home and when you leave the house, you don't want to make a big deal out of it. This is harder for you than it is for them, but this does mean that there's no kisses goodbye, there's no hug, there's no fussing the dog the second you get in the door. When you come in through the door, you want to completely ignore them, especially if they're excited to see you. Get on with your day, go make your cup of coffee, get your shoes off, whatever it may be, and they don't get any attention from you until all 4 paws are on the floor, and ideally until they've gone and laid down and done something by themselves independently. Then you can invite them up for that fuss. When you're leaving, you also don't want to give them that big fuss, that big play. You tell them how much you're going to miss them, because all you're doing is raising their excitement levels, raising their anxiety, and then you leave while they're in this heightened state. And what are they supposed to do with all that energy? They look for outlets, and that's usually where the destructive behavior comes in. Something else that we can do here for the dogs which are already struggling with separation anxiety is we counter condition our coming and going cues. So for example, whenever I put my boots on, my dogs know that that means either we're about to go for a walk or I'm about to leave them in the house. Now, these are 2 things that for a lot of dogs could cause a lot of anxiety, could cause a lot of overstimulation. But what we've worked hard on is making sure that these cues are as neutral as possible. So your cues are going to be different from mine. It may be when you put your coat on, it may be whenever you grab your keys, whatever that routine is that your dog picks up on your cues, meaning you're going to leave them. You want to make these as neutral a thing as possible. So for example, if every time you pick the keys up to leave the house, the dog gets really overstimulated, really anxious, what you want to do is start picking the keys up whenever you're doing other things, not just whenever you're going to go leave the dog and not just when you're away out for a walk. Make this as commonplace as possible. Put your boots on, sit down and watch TV for a little bit, take them off, put your coat on, take your coat back off, make it completely normal. Put your coat and shoes on, walk out the door, come back in, completely ignoring the dog. Make this as neutral as possible. Again, no fusses, no goodbyes. Just you coming and going from the house is something that's going to happen, and it's nothing that the dog needs to be worried about. Tip number 3 is enrichment, giving your dog something to do while they're in the house by themselves all day. Now, we all remember lockdown, being stuck in the house, only being allowed out for 1 walk a day. That should hopefully give us some kind of insight into what it's like for our dogs being left, and they're not in the fortunate position where they can stick TV on or they can do something online. So we need to make sure that the dogs have an outlet while we're gone. This can be something as simple as toys. If your dog enjoys playing with toys, you can complicate the enrichment. You can use enrichment rotas, so every day of the week the dog's getting something different. A great tip is to use something like a Kong. Kongs unfortunately don't last very long. Dogs figure them out quite quickly. But what you can do is fill it with wet food, peanut butter, anything that's safe for your dog that you can freeze the night before. And then whenever you give them the frozen Kong, this has turned 2 minutes of fun into up to 40 minutes to an hour of fun. The other benefit here is anything you can do to get your dog to lick will actually relieve tension and will help them calm down. Another good source of enrichment is something like a snuffle mat or a licky mat. Licky mat will be the same thing as your Kong. It encourages them to lick, which will help relieve tension, help relieve stress. The snuffle mat will encourage them to sniff. You hide treats in a snuffle mat, you can make your own, and encouraging them to sniff and slow down and think will help alleviate some anxiety as well. Now, with toys, what you have to keep in mind is toys might have the opposite effect of what you're hoping for. So if you have a dog that's obsessed with tennis balls and you leave them with a bunch of tennis balls, all you're going to do is heighten them, and then whenever they suddenly get bored of the tennis balls, they'll have destroyed the place, or they'll be so busy chasing the tennis balls that they'll be like a bull in a china shop. So you need to know your dog here, and you need to know what's going to work for them and what's not going to work for them. Every dog is an individual. I've seen people use like these sucky cups that stick to the floor and have a rag toy stuck to the end of it. And for some dogs, that's fantastic. But for something like a Staffy, something like a pit bull that just loves to rag on things and loves to tug, they could develop almost like a stereotypical repetitive behavior where they're just stuck on that all day, heightening and heightening and heightening. And that's going to lead to more anxiety and more problems. So make sure that your training plan and your enrichment plan is bespoke to your dog. So this leads us nicely into our fourth tip, living a fulfilling life. Now, all the tips we've talked about so far are fantastic, but if we just start implementing those and our dog's still not being exercised appropriately, our dog's still not getting enough mental stimulation, and they're not getting breed fulfillment, then these tips might as well not be in place. Breed fulfillment, exercise fulfillment, mental enrichment, and having a proper relationship with your dog is such an important part of the separation anxiety journey. So you want to make sure your dog's getting plenty of exercise. You want to make sure that you're giving them lots of mental enrichment. And this can be simple things while you're out and about. Just implement some training into your walk. If you have a particular breed, look into their breed outlets, things that they will enjoy doing, and make sure that they live that fulfilling life. Because if they have separation anxiety, it usually means that they've got anxiety in other places as well. And one of the best things we can do for an anxious dog is build their confidence by allowing them to be the dog that they're genetically supposed to be. This leads us into tip number 5, which is routine. Dogs are animals which absolutely thrive on structure and routine. And if our dog can anticipate when certain things are going to happen throughout the day, they'll feel more confident and they won't be as anxious and worried about things. I like to make sure that my dogs are getting fed at the same time, that they're getting walked at the same time, and we do our training sessions usually around the same time as well. This doesn't mean that your walk has to be the same walk every day. This doesn't mean you have to do the same training session every day or their enrichment has to be the same every day, but it's just good that they know, right, whenever dad gets up, we're going to go out for a walk straight away, or when dad gets back from work, we have to wait about half an hour before we go out and on a walk or before we get our food. The other thing here, just off the back of dogs thriving on routine and structure and a mishap in that structure causing anxiety, there's studies done on dogs' ability to tell time. Now, obviously it's not as in-depth as ours, but whenever you leave the home, there's a certain amount of your smell particle that's left in the air. And let's say you're out at work from 9 till 5, you get home at say 5:30 every day. At 5:30, there's a certain percentage of your smell particle left in the air that your dog can pick up on, and they know when there's this amount of the smell left, that's usually whenever my parent comes home and I get to see them again. So this causes a little bit of excitement, this can cause a little bit of anxiety. And what that means is if for some reason you don't get home at 5:30 that day, you get home at 8:30, you get home at 7:30, you're much later, your dog's anticipated you being home at a certain time, and the shake-up of that can be the thing that triggers their anxiety and can cause some destruction in the home. So as much as possible, obviously everyone has to live their life, everyone has jobs and different needs, but structure is really going to help whenever it comes to your separation anxiety. Just off the back of that as well, if you are ever going to be out of the house for a prolonged period of time, especially if it's something your dog's not used to, if safe and appropriate to do so, it could be beneficial to have someone nip in and check on them or get them out for a walk during the day. You can look at dog walkers or just a family friend coming around to sit with them if they're really struggling. And for our bonus tip, which is actually 2 tips in one, now this is something I think is so important when it comes to separation anxiety. I've watched a lot of other trainers' videos on separation anxiety, I've read a lot of books, I've worked with a lot of clients and a lot of other dog professionals, and this is something I find people often skip over, but it's such an important thing that we need to take into account when working on separation anxiety, and that is to teach your dog to do nothing. Now, enrichment is great, and giving our dogs things to do throughout the day is fantastic when we're not there, and that'll be great for some dogs, but the most important thing we can teach our dog is to be comfortable doing nothing. Like, teach them to settle, teach them to be independent and relax. If we have a dog that's constantly needing something from us, constantly needing something to do, then when we do leave the house, they are going to be stressed and we will get separation anxiety behaviours, we will get destructive behaviours. But if we can work on them settling in the home, it's a fantastic skill that they'll have, and it means that we can be comfortable leaving them places for a longer period of time. What I like to do, for example, with my two dogs, I have a German Shepherd and a Collie Cross, two very highly strung working breeds, and when we're out of the house and we're working on training, that's their opportunity to, you know, fulfill themselves and to run around and go crazy and play and train, etc. But when we get back to the house, that's the off switch, and they need to learn that all that running about and causing trouble when we're outside isn't what we get to do in the home. When we're back in the home, we need to settle, and we're not allowed to run about and chase after toys and things like that. Having that off switch is a fantastic tool to help your dog settle. A good way to teach this is to use something like a bed or crate, and every time your dog performs an independent behavior, if they take themselves off and lie down in bed, then you can mark this behavior and you can reward it. What you want to make sure you're not doing though is every time the dog goes and lies down and settles, if you mark it, you might inadvertently cause them to break their calmness and come over to you to get the treat. We will have another video on teaching kind of how to teach your dog to settle, but something to keep in mind in the meantime. Also, just on top of that, something I've seen work fantastically with my own dog and with some of my clients' dogs is when we're working on teaching a settle, when we're teaching these kind of calming, relaxing behaviors, I like to use music. Now, you've probably seen a lot of videos on separation anxiety where they say you can play music for your dog and it helps them have something to do while you're out of the house, gives them something to think about. But I like to kind of condition music with certain behaviors. So just like a mark can be associated with a treat, you can associate certain sounds with different things. So while I'm teaching my dog to settle, I'll play a particular album, a particular song that's nice and calm and relaxing for them. And we practice those calm, independent behaviors when that music is playing. And then whenever I need to leave the house for a prolonged period of time, if I stick that music on, the dog knows that it's time to relax and help them switch off. This can take a little bit of time to develop and is a little bit more of an advanced technique whenever it comes to separation anxiety. We will hopefully have future videos on pairing certain stimulus with other stimulus, and we'll deep dive on markers and everything else if there's been anything that you haven't understood in today's video. Separation anxiety is a big topic and there's lots that we could discuss. If there's any stories you'd like to share about your separation anxiety journey, please leave a comment below. Do like the video and subscribe if you want to see any of our future videos. Let us know what you would like to see covered in any future videos, and thanks again for watching.